Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's reading of Artemis Fowl by Ian Colfer. I am halfway through chapter 3, and I will finish that chapter today. The pressure elevators were powered by gaseous columns vented from the Earth's core. The LEP tech boys, under Foley's guidance, had fashioned titanium eggs that could ride on the currents. They had their own independent motors, but for an express ride to the surface, there was nothing like a blast from a tidal flare. Foley led her past a long line of chute bays to E7. The pod sat in its clamp, looking very fragile to be rocketing about on magma steams. Its underside was charred black and pockmarked from shrapnel. The centaur slapped it fondly on a fender. "This baby's been in service for 50 years. Oldest model, still in the chutes." Holly swallowed. The chutes made her nervous enough without riding in an antique. "Why does it come offline?" Foley scratched his hairy belly. "With funding the way it is, not until we have us a fatality." Holly cranked open the heavy door, the rubber seal yielding with a hiss. The pod was not built for comfort. There was barely enough space for a restraining seat among the jumble of electronics. "What's that?" asked Holly, pointing at a grayish stain on the seat's headrest. Foley shifted uncomfortably. Brain fluid, I think. We had a pressure leak on the last mission. But that's plugged now, and the officer lived. Down a few IQ points, but alive, and he still can take liquids." "Oh, well, that's all right then," quipped Holly, threading her way through the mass of wires. Foley strapped the harness onto her, checking the restraints thoroughly. "All set?" Holly nodded. Foley tapped her helmet mic. "Keep in touch," he said, pulling the door closed behind him. "Don't think about it," Holly told herself. "Don't think about the white-hot magna flow that's going to engulf this tiny craft. Don't think about hurling towards the surface with a Mach 2 force trying to turn you inside out. And certainly don't think about the blood-crazed troll ready to disembowel you with his tusks. Nope. Don't think about that any of that stuff." Too late. Foley's voice sounded in her earpiece. "T-minus 20, he said. "We're on a secure channel in case the mud people have started underground monitoring. You never know. An oil tanker from the Middle East intercepted a transmission one time. What a mess that was." Holly adjusted her helmet mic. "Focus, Foley. My life is in your hands here." Okay, sorry. We're going to use the rail to drop you into E7's main shaft. There's a surge due any minute. That should see you past the first 100 clicks, and then you're on your own." Holly nodded, curling her finger around the twin joysticks. "All systems check. Fire it up." There was a whoosh as the pod's engines ignited. The tiny craft jostled in its housing, shaking Holly like a bead in a rattle. She could barely hear Foley speaking into her ear. "You're in the secondary shaft now. Get ready to fly. Short." Holly pulled a rubber cylinder from the dash and slipped it between her teeth. No good having a radio if you swallowed your tongue. She activated the external cameras and put on the view on screen. The entrance to E7 was creeping towards her. The air was shimmering in the landing light glow. White-hot sparks tumbled into the secondary shaft. Holly couldn't hear the roar, but she could imagine it. A raw, skinning wind like a million trolls howling. Her fingers tightened around the joysticks. The pod shuddered to a halt at the lip. The chute stretched above and below, massive, boundless, like dropping an ant down a drain pipe. "Righto," crackled Foley. "Hold on to your breakfast. Roller coasters ain't got nothing on this." Holly nodded. She couldn't speak, not with the rubber in her mouth. The centaur would be able to see her would be able to see her in the pod cam anyway. "Sayonara, sweetheart," said Foley, and he pressed the button. The pod's clamp tilted, rolling Holly into the abyss. Her stomach tightened as G-force hold took her, dragging her to the center of the earth. The seismology section had a million probes down here with a 99.8 success rate at predicting the magna flares, but there was always that 0.2%. The fall seemed to last for an eternity, and just when Holly had mentally consigned herself to the scrap heap, she felt it. That unforgettable vibration, the feeling that outside her tiny sphere the whole world was being shaken apart. "Here it comes." "Fins," she said, spitting the word around the cylinder. Foley may have replied. She couldn't hear him anymore. Holly couldn't even hear herself, but she did see the stabilization fins slide out on the monitor. The flare caught her like a hurricane, spinning the pool at first until the fins caught. Half-melted rocks pelted the craft's underside, jolting it towards the chute walls. Holly compensated with bursts from the joystick. The heat was tremendous in the confined space, enough to fry a human, but fairy lungs are made of stronger stuff. The acceleration dragged at her body with invisible hands, stretching the flesh over her arms and face. Holly blinked salty sweat from her eyes and concentrated on the monitor. The flare had totally engulfed her pod, and it was a big one too. Force 7 at the very least, a good 1,000-foot girth. Orange-striped magnets swirled and hissed around her, searching for a weak point in the metal casing. The pod groaned and complained, 50-year-old rivets threatening to pop. Holly shook her head. The first thing she was going to do on her return was kick Foley straight in the hairy behind. She felt like a nut inside a shell between a gnome's molars, doomed. A bow plate buckled, popping in as though punched by a giant fist. The pressure light blinked on. Holly could feel her head being squeezed. The eyes would be the first to go, popping like ripe berries. She checked the dials. 20 more seconds before she rode out the flare and was running on thermals. Those 20 seconds seemed like an age. Holly sealed the helmet to protect her eyes, riding out the final barrage of rocks. And suddenly they were clear, sailing upwards on the comparatively gentle spirals of hot air. Holly added her own thrusters to the upward force. No time to waste floating around on the wind. Above her, a circle of neon lights marked the docking zone. Holly swiveled horizontally and pointed the docking nodes at the lights. This was delicate. Many recon pilots had made it this far only to miss the port and lose valuable time. Not Holly. She was a natural. First in the academy. She gave the thrusters one final squeeze and coasted the last 100 feet. Using the rudders beneath her feet, she teased the pod through the circle of light and into its clamp on the landing pod. The nodes revolved, settling into their grooves. Safe. Holly smacked herself on the chest, releasing the safety harness. Once the door seal was open, sweet surface air flooded the cabin. There was nothing like that. First breath after a ride in the chutes. She breathed deeply, purging the stale pod air from her lungs. How had the people ever left the surface? Sometimes she wished that her ancestors had stayed to fight it out with the mud people, but there were too many of them. Unlike fairies who could produce only a single child every 20 years, mud people bred like rodents. Numbers would subdue even magic. Although she was enjoying the night air, Holly could taste traces of pollutants. The mud people destroyed everything they came into contact with. Of course they didn't live in the mud anymore. Not in this country, at least. Oh no. Big fancy dwellings with rooms for everything. Rooms for sleeping, rooms for eating, even a room to go to the toilet. Indoors. Holly shuddered. Imagine going to the toilet inside your own house. Disgusting. The only good thing about going to the toilet was the minerals being returned to the earth. But the mud people had even managed to botch that up by treating the stuff with bottles of blue chemicals. If anyone had told her 100 years ago that humans would be taking the fertile out of the fertilizer, she would have told them to get some air holes drilled into their skull. Holly unhooked a set of wings from their bracket. They were double ovals with a clunky motor. She moaned. Dragonflies. She hated that model. Gas engine, if you could believe it. And heavier than a pig dipped in mud. Now the Hummingbird Z7, that was transport. Whisper silence with a satellite-bound solar battery that would fly you twice around the world. But there were budget cuts again. On her wrist, the locator began to beep. She was in range. Holly stepped out of the pod and onto the landing bay. She was inside a camouflage mound of earth, commonly known as a fairy fort. Indeed, the people used to live in these until they were driven deeper underground. There wasn't much technology, just a few external monitors and a self-destructive device should the baby be discovered. There was nothing on the screens, all clear. The pneumatic doors were slightly askew where the troll had barged through, but otherwise everything seemed operational. Holly strapped on the wings, stepping into the outside world. The Italian night sky was crisp and brisk, infused with olive and vine. Crickets clicked in the rough grass, and moss flooded in the starlight. Holly couldn't stop herself smiling. It was worth the risk, every bit of it. Speaking of risk, she checked the locator. The bip was much stronger now. The troll was almost at the town walls. She could appreciate nature after this mission was over. Now it was time for action. Holly primed the wing's motor, pulling the starter cord over her shoulder. Nothing. She fumed silently. Every spoiled kid in Haven had a hummingbird for their wilderness holidays, and there were LEP with wings that were junk when they were new. She yanked the cord again, and then again. On the third red she caught, spewing a stream of smoke and fumes into the night. "About time," she grunted, flicking the throttle wide open. The wings flapped their way up to a steady beat, and with not a little effort lifted Captain Holly Short into the night sky. Even without the locator, the troll would have been easy to follow. It had left a trail of destruction, wider than a tunnel of excavator. Holly flew low, skipping between the mist hazes and trees, matching the troll's course. The crazed creature had cut a swath through the middle of the vineyard, turned a stone wall to rubble, and left a guard dog gibbering under a hedge. Then she flew over the cows. It was not a pretty sight. Without going into details, let's just say that there wasn't much left besides horns and hooves. The red bip was louder now. Louder meant closer. She could see the town below her, nestled on top of a low hill, surrounded by a crenellated wall from the Middle Ages. Light still burned in most windows. Time for a little magic. A lot of the magic attributed to the people is just superstition, but they do have certain powers. Healing, the mesmer, and shielding among them. Shielding is really a misdemeanor. What fairies actually do is to vibrate at such a high frequency that they're never in one place long enough to be seen. Humans may notice a slight shimmer in the air if they're paying close attention, which they rarely are, and even then the shimmer is generally attributed to evaporation. Typical of mud people to invent a complicated explanation for a simple phenomenon. Holly switched on her shield. It took a bit more out of her than usual. She could feel the strain and the beads of sweat on her forehead. I really should complete the ritual, she thought. The sooner the better. Some commotion below broke into her thoughts, something that didn't gel with the nighttime noises. Holly adjusted the trim on her backpack and flew in for a closer look. Look only, she reminded herself. That was her job. A recon officer was sent up the chutes to pinpoint the target, while the retrieval boys took a nice, cushy shuttle. The troll was directly below her, pounding against the town's outer wall, which was coming away in chunks beneath his powerful fingers. Holly sucked in a startled gasp. This guy was a monster, big as an elephant and 10 times as mean. But this particular beast was worse than mean. He was scared. "Control," said Holly into her mic. "Runner located. Situation critical topside." Root himself was on the other side of the comlink. "Clarify, Captain." Holly pointed her video link at the troll. "Runner's going through the town wall. Contact imminent. How far away is retrieval?" "ETA 5 minutes minimum. We're still in the shuttle." Holly bit her lip. Root was in the shuttle? "That's too long, Commander. This whole town is going to explode in 10 seconds. I'm going in." "Negative, Holly," Captain Short. "You don't have an invite. You know the law. Hold your position." "But, Commander," Root cut her off. No buts, Captain. Hang back. That's an order." Holly's entire body felt like a heartbeat. Gasoline fumes were addling her brain. What could she do? What was the right decision to make? Lives or orders? Then the troll broke through the wall and a child's voice split the night. "A toot-toot!" it screamed. Help! An invitation. At a stretch. "Sorry, Commander. The troll is light crazy and there are children in there." She could imagine Root's face, purple with rage, as he spat into the mic. "I'll have your stripe, Short. You'll spend the next 100 years on drain duty." But it was no use. Holly had disconnected her mic and swooped in after the troll. Streamlining her body, Captain Short ducked into the hole. She appeared to be in a restaurant, a packed restaurant. The troll had been temporarily blinded by the electric light and was thrashing about in the center of the floor. The patrons were stunned. Even the child's plea had petered out. They sat gaping, party hats perched comically on their heads. Waiters froze. Huge trays of pasta quivered on their splayed fingers. Chubby Italian infants covered their eyes with chubby fingers. It was always like this in the beginning, the shocked silence. Then came the screaming. A wine bottle crashed to the floor. It broke the spell. The pandemonium started. Holly winced. Trolls hated noise almost as much as light. The troll lifted massive shaggy shoulders, its retractable claws sliding out with an ominous shriek. Classic predator behavior. The beast was about to strike. Holly drew her weapon and flicked it up in the second setting. She couldn't kill the troll under any circumstances, not to save humans, but she could certainly put him out until retrieval arrived. Aiming for the weak points at the base of the skull, she let the troll have one long burst of the concentrated iron ray. The beast staggered, stumbled a few steps, and then got very angry. "It's okay," thought Holly. "I'm shielded, invisible. To any onlookers, it would seem as though the pulsing blue beam emanated from thin air. The troll rounded on her, its muddy dreadlocks swinging like candles. No panic, it can't see me. The troll picked up a table. Invisible, totally invisible. He pulled back a shaggy arm and let fly. Just a slight shimmer in the air. The table tumbled straight towards her head. Hallie moved. A second too late. The table clipped her backpack, knocking the gas tank clear off and spun through the air, trailing flammable fluid. Italian restaurants, wouldn't you know, full of candles. The tank twirled right through an elaborate candelabra and burst into flames like some deadly firework. Most of the gas landed on the troll, and so did Hallie. The troll could see her, there was no doubt about it. It squinted at her through the hated light, its brow a rictus of pain and fear. Her shield was off, her magic was gone. Hallie twisted in the troll's grip, but it was useless. The creature's fingers were the size of bananas and nowhere near as pliant. They were squashing the breath from her ribcage with savage ease. Needle-like claws were scraping at the toughened material of her uniform. Any second now, they would punch through, and that would be that. Hallie couldn't think. The restaurant was a carousel of chaos. The troll was gnashing its tusks, greasy molars trying to grip her helmet. Hallie could smell its fetid breath through her filters. She could smell the odor of burning fur, too, as the fire spread along the troll's back. The beast's green tongue rasped across her visor, sliming the lower section. The visor! That was it, her only chance. Hallie wormed her free hand to the helmet controls, the tunnel lights, high beams. She depressed the sunken button, and 800 watts of unfiltered light blasted from the twin spotlights above her eyes. The troll reared back, a penetrating scream exploding from between rows of teeth. Dozens of glasses and bottles shattered where they stood. It was too much for the poor beast. Stunned, set on fire, and now blinded, the shock and pain made its way through its tiny brain, ordering it to shut down. The troll compiled, kneeling over with almost comic stiffness. Hallie rolled too, to avoid a scything tusk. There was complete silence but for the tinkling glass, crackling fur, and the sudden release of breath. Hallie climbed shakily to her feet, and there were a lot of eyes following her. Human eyes. She was 100% visible, and these humans wouldn't stay complacent for long. The breed never did. Containment was the issue. She raised her empty palms, a gesture of peace. "Scusi tutti," she said, the language flowing easily from her tongue. The Italians, ever graceful, muttered that it was nothing. Hallie reached slowly into her pocket and withdrew a small sphere. She placed it in the middle of the floor. "Guardate," she said. "Look." The restaurant's patrons complied, leaning in to see the small silver ball. It was ticking faster and faster, almost like a countdown. Hallie turned her back to the sphere. 3, 2, 1, boom! Flash! Mass unconsciousness. Nothing fatal, but headaches all around in about 40 minutes. Hallie sighed. Safe for the moment. She ran to the door and slid the latch across. Nobody was going in or out, except through the big gaping hole in the wall. Next, she doused the smoldering troll with the contents of the restaurant's fire extinguisher, hoping the icy powder wouldn't revive the sleeping behemoth. Hallie surveyed the mess she created. There was no doubt it was a shambles, worse than Hamburg. Root would skin her alive. She'd rather face the troll any day. This was the end of her career for sure. But suddenly that didn't seem so important because her ribs were aching and she had a blinder of a pressure headache coming on. Perhaps a rest, just for a second, so she could pull herself together before retrieval showed up. Hallie didn't even bother looking for a chair. She simply allowed her legs to buckle beneath her, sinking to the chessboard linoleum floor. Waking up to Commander Root's bulging features is the stuff of nightmares. Hallie's eyes flickered open, and for a second she could have sworn there was concern in those eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the customary vein-popping fury. "Captain Short!" he roared, mindless of her headache. "What in the name of sanity happened here?" Hallie rose shakily to her feet. There was... The sentences just wouldn't come. "You disobeyed a direct order. I told you to hang back. You know it's forbidden to enter a human building without an invitation." Hallie shook the shadows from her vision. "I got invited in. A child called for help." "You're on shaky ground there, Short." "There's a precedent, sir. Corporal Rowe versus the state. The jury ruled that the trapped woman's cry for help could be accepted as an invitation into the building. Anyway, you're all here now. That means you accepted the invitation, too." Said Root doubtfully. Suppose you were lucky. Things could have been worse. Holly looked around. Things couldn't have been a lot worse. The establishment was pretty trashed, and there were 40 humans out for the count. The tech boys were attaching mind-wipe electrodes to the temples of unconscious diners. We managed to secure the area in spite of half the town hammering on the door. What about the hole? Root smirked. See for yourself. Holly glanced over. Retrieval had jimmied a hologram lead into the existing electricity sockets and were projecting an unbattered wall over the hole. The holograms were handy for quick patches, but no good under scrutiny. Anyone who examined the wall too closely would have noticed the slight transparent patch was exactly the same as the stretch beside it. In this case, there were 2 identical patches of spider web cracks and 2 reproductions of the same Rembrandt. But the people inside the pizzeria were in no condition to examine walls, and by the time they woke up, the wall would be repaired by the telekinetic division, and the entire paranormal experience would be removed from their memories. A retrieval officer bolted from the restroom. Commander! Yes, Sergeant? There's a human in here, sir. The concussor didn't reach him. He's coming, sir. Right now, sir. Shields! Barked Root. Everyone! Holly tried. She really did, but it wouldn't come. Her magic was gone. A toddler waddled out of the bathroom, his eyes heavy with sleep. He pointed a pudgy finger directly at Holly. Ciao, Folletto, he said before climbing into his father's lap to continue his snooze. Root shimmered back into the visual spectrum. He was, if possible, even angrier than before. What happened to your shield, Short? Holly swallowed. Stress, Commander, she offered hopefully. Root wasn't having any of it. You lied to me, Captain. You're not running hot at all, are you? Holly shook her head mutely. How long since you completed the ritual? Holly chewed her lip. I'd say about 4 years, sir. Root nearly popped a vein. 4 years? It's a wonder you've lasted this long. Do it now, tonight. You're not coming below ground again without your powers. You're a danger to yourself and fellow officers. Yes, sir. Get a set of hummingbirds from Retrieval and zip across to the old country. There's a full moon tonight. Yes, sir. And don't think I've forgotten about this shambles. We'll talk about it when you get back. Yes, sir. Very good, sir. Holly turned to go, but Root cleared his throat for attention. Oh, and Captain Short? Yes, sir. Root's face had lost its purple tinge. He almost seemed embarrassed. Well done on the life-saving thing. Couldn't have been worse. Oh, awful lot worse. Holly beamed behind her visor. Perhaps she wouldn't be kicked out of recon after all. Thank you, sir. Root grunted, his complexion returning to its normal ruddy hue. Now get out of here and don't come back until you're full to the tips of your ears with magic. Holly sighed. So much for gratitude. Yes, sir. On my way, sir. And that ends chapter 3, and tomorrow we'll pick up again with chapter 4. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you then. Bye.